The morning sun painted golden streaks through the ancient oak trees of Windsor Great Park as Queen Elizabeth walked slowly along her favorite forest path. At 87 years old, she still insisted on taking her daily walks. Though they were now shorter and more careful than the long hikes she had enjoyed in her younger days, her walking stick tapped softly against the moss-covered stones that marked the old trail, creating a gentle rhythm that matched her steady pace. Behind her, keeping a respectful distance of 20 paces, walked Sergeant Michael Thompson of the Queen's Guard. The 26-year-old soldier had been protecting the Queen for 2 years, and these peaceful forest walks had become his favorite duty. Unlike the formal ceremonies and public events where he had to stand perfectly still for hours, these morning walks allowed him to move naturally, while staying alert for any potential dangers. Michael was tall and strong, with sharp blue eyes that constantly scanned the forest around them. His dark suit was specially made to hide the equipment he carried for emergencies, including a radio that kept him connected to the main security team and a first aid kit that he hoped he would never need to use. Despite the peaceful nature of these walks, Michael never forgot that protecting the Queen was his most important job. The forest was especially beautiful this morning, with thick green leaves filtering the sunlight and creating dancing shadows on the ground. Birds sang their morning songs from high in the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimed 8 o'clock. The air smelled fresh and clean, filled with the sense of growing plants and morning dew that still sparkled on the grass and flowers. Queen Elizabeth wore her favorite green jacket, perfect for walking in the woods, along with comfortable leather boots that had served her well on countless outdoor adventures over the years. A blue silk scarf protected her carefully styled hair from the morning dampness, and she carried her special walking stick made from English oak wood that had been a gift from one of her forest managers many years ago, walking parallel to their route. About 50 meters away through the trees, Detective Inspector Sarah Collins from the Metropolitan Police kept watch for any unusual activity. She moved quietly through the forest like a shadow, her trained eyes watching for anything that might threaten the Queen's safety. Sarah had 15 years of experience protecting important people, and she knew how to stay invisible while staying ready to help if needed. This particular morning felt different to Michael, though he couldn't explain exactly why. The forest seemed quieter than usual, with fewer birds singing and an unusual stillness that made every small sound seem louder. His military training had taught him to trust these feelings, as they often warned of danger before anything obvious appeared. The path they followed was one the Queen had walked hundreds of times. It wound through some of the oldest parts of the royal forest, where massive trees had been growing for centuries. These ancient giants formed a natural ceiling overhead, their branches reaching across the path to create a green tunnel that felt like walking through a living cathedral. Today's destination was the Queen's favorite resting spot, a large fallen oak tree that had come down during a winter storm 2 years earlier. Instead of removing it, the royal groundskeepers had left it in place at Her Majesty's request, as it made a perfect bench at exactly the right height for comfortable sitting. The fallen tree was positioned in a small clearing where wildflowers grew in, where the Queen could watch for deer and other forest animals that often appeared in the early morning. The bluebells should be particularly lovely today, Your Majesty, Michael said respectfully, referring to the beautiful blue flowers that carpeted parts of the forest floor during spring. The gardeners mentioned that this year's bloom is one of the best they've seen in decades. The Queen smiled, clearly pleased by the observation. Yes, I noticed them beginning to flower last week. There's something magical about bluebells in an English forest, don't you think? They connect us to centuries of history. As people have been walking these same paths and enjoying these same flowers for generations, her comment reminded Michael of one of the things he most admired about the Queen, despite her position as one of the most important people in the world. She found genuine joy in simple, natural things like flowers and bird songs. She never took for granted the beauty that surrounded her. Even though she had access to the finest gardens and most spectacular views anywhere on Earth, as they approached the fallen oak tree, Michael automatically began scanning the area more carefully. His training had taught him to be especially alert at places where they stopped, as these locations could present security risks if not properly checked. The fallen tree had been their resting spot many times before, but Michael always examined it carefully to ensure it remained safe and stable. The massive oak was truly impressive, measuring nearly 4 feet across at its base and stretching more than 60 feet in length. Its bark had weathered and softened since its fall, making it surprisingly comfortable for sitting, while its position had created a lovely small clearing where spring flowers had begun to grow in the increased sunlight. "Michael, would you mind checking the log before I sit down?" the Queen asked, her voice carrying the natural authority that came from more than 60 years on the throne. "Yesterday, it seemed a bit less stable than usual, and I'd rather be safe than sorry with these old bones of mine." The request was perfectly reasonable and exactly the kind of practical caution that Michael had come to expect from the Queen during their walks together. Despite her advanced age, she remained remarkably active and independent, but she also understood the importance of being careful and taking sensible precautions to avoid unnecessary risks. "Of course, Your Majesty," Michael replied, moving toward the fallen tree with a systematic caution that had become second nature during his military service. He began examining how the log rested against the smaller trees that had broken its fall, checking for any signs of movement or weakness that might make it unsafe. The morning remained peaceful and beautiful, with sunlight filtering through the leaves and creating a perfect setting for a quiet rest in the forest. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary as Michael approached the fallen oak, running his hands along its surface to test its stability. The bark felt solid and secure, exactly as it had during their previous visits to this spot. But as Michael continued his inspection, moving around to check the other side of the log, he noticed something that made his heart stop. There, coiled in the shadowy space beneath the fallen tree, was a snake unlike anything he had ever seen in the British countryside. Michael's blood turned to ice as he stared at the massive snake coiled beneath the Queen's favorite resting spot. The creature was enormous, nearly 6 feet long and as thick as his arm, with dark scales that seemed to absorb the filtered forest light. Its triangular head and the way it held itself told Michael's trained eye that this was definitely a venomous species, though nothing like any British snake he had ever learned about. The snake's eyes were fixed on him with an alertness that showed it was fully aware of his presence and ready to defend itself. Its tongue flicked in and out constantly, tasting the air and gathering information about the humans who had disturbed its peaceful hiding place. The creature's body was perfectly coiled in a position that would allow it to strike with lightning speed if it felt threatened. Michael's military training kicked in immediately. He had served 2 tours in Afghanistan where dangerous snakes were a real threat to soldiers, and he recognized the signs of a creature that was both capable of killing and prepared to do so if necessary. The snake's positioning was particularly dangerous because it was directly beneath where the Queen typically sat during their morning walks. If Her Majesty had settled onto the log without Michael checking the area first, her feet would have been dangling just inches above the coiled serpent. Any movement or vibration might have triggered an attack, and at the Queen's age, even a non-fatal snake bite could cause serious health problems due to the SOS and stress of the encounter. Michael forced himself to remain calm and think clearly about his options. His most important job was protecting the Queen, which meant he needed to get her away from this danger without causing panic or sudden movements that might provoke the snake into attacking. The creature appeared to be more interested in hiding than fighting, but wild animals could be unpredictable, especially when they felt cornered or threatened. "Your Majesty, I think we should continue walking this morning rather than stopping here," Michael said carefully, keeping his voice steady and casual. "The path ahead looks particularly beautiful today, and we might see some of the deer that had been spotted in the meadow beyond the next." The Queen paused and looked at Michael with the sharp intelligence that had served her well through decades of dealing with people who sometimes had important information they were reluctant to share directly. She could sense that something was wrong, though she couldn't see what had caught Michael's attention behind the fallen log. "Michael, you seem concerned about something," the Queen observed, her voice gentle but carrying the unmistakable authority of someone who expected honest answers. Is there something specific I should know about? I found that direct communication usually works better than polite suggestions. Even when the news might be unpleasant, Michael realized that he could no longer avoid explaining the situation. The Queen was too experienced and too intelligent to be distracted by vague suggestions about continuing their walk. She had already detected his concern, and any attempt to physically guide her away without explanation might result in exactly the kind of sudden movements he was trying to avoid. "Your Majesty, there's a large snake beneath the log where you usually sit," Michael said quietly, his military training helping him deliver the information in a calm, factual way. "It appears to be a venomous species, though not one that's native to Britain. I believe we should move away from this area immediately and contact the proper authorities to handle the situation safely." The Queen's reaction was everything Michael could have hoped for. Instead of panic or fear, she simply nodded once and took a small, controlled step backward. Her years of experience handling unexpected and sometimes dangerous situations served her well in this moment. Her face showed concern, but not terror, and her movements remained steady and deliberate. "I see," the Queen said calmly, though Michael could hear a slight tension in her voice that showed she understood how serious this situation could be. "How large would you estimate this creature to be, and how close are we to it right now?" Michael appreciated Her Majesty's practical questions, which showed she was thinking clearly about their immediate safety rather than letting fear cloud her judgment. "Approximately 6 feet long, Your Majesty, coiled directly under the section of log where you typically sit. We're currently about 10 feet away, which should be outside its striking range. But I'd recommend we move further back while we decide what to do next." The Queen nodded again and continued backing away slowly, her movements careful and controlled. Michael matched her pace, keeping himself positioned between Her Majesty and the potential threat while maintaining visual contact with the snake to watch for any changes in its behavior. The creature remained coiled but alert, its tongue continuing to test the air as it monitored the humans in its territory. Detective Inspector Sarah Collins, who had been watching their progress from her position in the forest, noticed that they had stopped moving along their usual route and were instead backing away from the rest area. Her protective instincts immediately raised concerns. She began moving closer to their position while communicating through her radio. "Control, this is Collins. The principal has deviated from the planned route and appears to be withdrawing from the rest area. Request permission to close distance and assess the situation," Sarah spoke quietly into her radio, her voice carrying the professional calm that marked experienced protection officers dealing with potentially serious situations. The response from the central control room was immediate. "Collins, maintain visual contact and be prepared to intervene if necessary. Thompson should be providing updates through his communication system if there's a specific threat requiring additional response." Michael activated his own emergency communication system with a discrete hand signal that would alert the control room to an active security situation without requiring verbal communication that might make the current crisis worse. The system was designed to let protection officers request help while maintaining focus on the immediate threat they were handling. Queen continued to demonstrate the remarkable composure that had served her throughout decades of public service and unexpected challenges. She kept her movements slow and careful, avoiding any sudden actions that might provoke the snake while also staying ready to move quickly if the situation required immediate action. "Michael, what would be the proper procedure for handling something like this?" she asked quietly. "Should we simply wait for the creature to move away on its own? Or do we need to call specialists to remove it safely?" The question showed Her Majesty's understanding that this wasn't a simple problem that could be solved quickly or easily. Venomous snakes required expert handling by people with proper equipment and training, and the location in a royal park meant that any response would need to coordinate between multiple agencies, including wildlife services, security teams, and medical support in case of emergencies. The snake suddenly shifted position slightly, causing both Michael and the Queen to freeze in place as they watched for signs that it might be preparing to move or attack. The creature's head rose a bit higher, and its tongue flicked more rapidly, suggesting increased awareness of the humans nearby and possible preparation for some kind of action. Michael felt his heart rate increase as he realized that their careful withdrawal might not be enough to ensure safety. The snake's behavior was becoming more active and potentially more dangerous with each passing moment. The forest morning that had begun so peacefully suddenly became deadly when the massive snake decided that the continued presence of humans near its hiding place was unacceptable. Without warning, the creature began to emerge from beneath the fallen log, its 6 feet of muscular body moving, with the fluid grace that made venomous serpents among nature's most efficient predators. Michael watched in fascination and growing alarm as the snake's diamond-patterned scales caught the morning sunlight filtering through the forest canopy. The creature's head remained raised and alert, its dark eyes focused on the humans who had invaded what it clearly considered its territory. Every movement the snake made was purposeful and controlled, demonstrating the kind of deadly efficiency that had allowed its species to survive for millions of years. "Your Majesty, please continue moving backward very slowly," Michael said, his voice steady, despite the adrenaline now coursing through his system. "The snake is becoming active, and we need to give it plenty of room to move away." Without feeling threatened or trapped, the Queen followed his guidance with the same composed dignity she had shown in countless challenging situations throughout her long reign. Her movements were deliberate and graceful, showing no sign of the fear that any reasonable person would feel when confronted with such a dangerous creature. She kept her walking stick firmly in hand but was careful not to make any sudden gestures that might be seen as aggressive by the increasingly agitated serpent detective inspector. Sarah Collins had been monitoring the situation from her concealed position and immediately recognized the escalating danger. She activated her emergency communication system and began coordinating with headquarters to mobilize wildlife specialists, medical support, and additional security personnel who might be needed to manage what was clearly becoming a complex and potentially life-threatening situation. "Control, this is Collins. We have confirmed dangerous wildlife threat requiring immediate specialist response. Large, unidentified snake species, definitely venomous, now active and mobile in the principal's immediate vicinity. Request urgent deployment of wildlife handling team and standby medical support." She spoke rapidly into her radio, while maintaining visual contact with the Queen and Michael. The response from headquarters was swift and professional. Within minutes, calls were being placed to wildlife rescue organizations, local experts familiar with exotic species, and specialized medical units trained to deal with venomous snake bites. The entire Royal Protection System was mobilizing to address a threat that none of them had specifically prepared for, but which they approached with systematic professionalism. The snake had now completely emerged from its hiding place and was moving with confident, fluid motions across the forest floor. Its massive body created S-shaped curves that propelled it forward with surprising speed despite its impressive size. The creature's head remained raised, scanning the environment as it searched for the best escape route away from the human presence that had disturbed its rest. Michael found himself trying to predict the snake's likely path while maintaining his protective position between the creature and the Queen. The serpent appeared to be heading in a direction that would take it deeper into the forest, which was exactly what he hoped for. However, he knew that wild animals could change direction suddenly and unpredictably, especially when they felt pressured or confused. The Queen maintained her steady retreat, following Michael's guidance while keeping her attention focused on the impressive reptile that had transformed their peaceful morning walk into a dangerous emergency. Despite the obvious threat, her expression showed more curiosity than fear, and she seemed genuinely interested in observing the creature's behavior and movements. "Michael, this is quite an extraordinary animal, despite the danger it represents," the Queen observed quietly. "I assume this isn't a species one would normally expect to find in an English forest. Do you have any idea how such a creature might have ended up in our park?" Her question demonstrated the intellectual curiosity that had always characterized the Queen's response to new and unusual situations. Even when facing potential physical danger, She remained interested in understanding the broader context of what they were experiencing. This ability to maintain analytical thinking under pressure was one of the qualities that had made her an effective leader for more than 6 decades. Michael appreciated Her Majesty's calm demeanor, but his primary attention remained focused on the snake's movements and ensuring their safe withdrawal from the area. It's possible the creature escaped from a private collection or was released by someone who could no longer care for it, Your Majesty. The exotic pet trade sometimes results in dangerous animals, ending up in inappropriate locations where they pose serious risks to public safety. The snake had moved, approximately 30 feet away from the fallen log, and seemed to be following a natural deer path through the forest that would take it toward a stream deeper in the woods. This was encouraging from a safety perspective, as it suggested the creature was more interested in finding suitable habitat than confronting the humans who had interrupted its morning rest. However, the forest around them remained unnaturally quiet, as if all the other wildlife had sensed the presence of a dangerous predator and chosen to remain hidden until the threat passed. The usual morning bird songs had completely stopped, creating an eerie silence broken only by the soft sounds of their careful footsteps and the distant rustle of the snake's movement through fallen leaves. Just as it seemed the crisis might resolve itself peacefully, disaster struck from an unexpected direction. A morning jogger, wearing headphones and completely absorbed in his exercise routine, emerged from a side trail that intersected the main path approximately 40 feet ahead of their current position. The runner was heading directly toward the area where the snake had been moving, completely unaware of the deadly danger that lay in his path. Michael's heart stopped as he realized what was about to happen. The jogger's pace and direction would bring him into direct contact with the venomous snake within seconds, and his headphones meant he couldn't hear any shouted warnings. The runner appeared to be in his 30s, probably a local resident who used the park's trails for regular exercise. With no idea that his morning routine was about to become a life-or-death encounter, "Stop! Danger ahead!" Michael shouted at the approaching jogger, his voice carrying with military authority designed to cut through confusion and panic. But the runner's music was too loud, and he continued jogging directly toward the snake with no awareness of his approaching peril. The snake's reaction to the jogger's approach was immediate and terrifying. The creature interpreted the rhythmic footfalls and ground vibrations as a threat to its safety and began coiling itself into the distinctive defensive position that preceded a strike. Its head rose higher, and its body formed tight coils that would provide the spring-like power needed to launch a lightning-fast attack. Michael faced an impossible choice in a split second that would define the rest of his life. He could maintain his protective position near the Queen, following every protocol he had been trained to follow, or he could abandon his post to try saving the innocent jogger who was about to run straight into a deadly trap. The Queen, watching the drama unfold with growing horror, immediately understood what Michael was thinking. "Go," she said quietly, but firmly. "Save that man. I'll be fine here." Without another moment's hesitation, Michael sprinted toward the approaching jogger and the coiled snake, knowing he had perhaps 10 seconds to prevent a tragedy that would likely result in the runner's death. Behind him, the Queen of England stood alone in the forest, watching her protector risk everything to save a stranger's life. The snake, seeing Michael's rapid approach, made its decision. With movements too fast for the human eye to follow clearly, the massive serpent launched itself through the air directly toward the running man who still had no idea he was about to die. Time seemed to slow to an impossible crawl as Michael watched the deadly drama unfold before him. The venomous snake was launching itself through the air with the speed of a striking cobra, its massive body fully extended and fangs bared as it aimed for the unsuspecting jogger who continued, running directly into the path of certain death. Michael's legs pumped harder than they ever had before, his military training pushing his body beyond normal limits as he raced to intercept the attack. The jogger, a 34-year-old accountant named David Walsh, who lived in nearby Windsor, remained completely oblivious to the mortal danger bearing down on him. His morning playlist was pumping energetic music through his noise-canceling headphones. His eyes were focused on the familiar forest path ahead. David had been using this route for his daily runs for 3 years and had never encountered anything more dangerous than an occasional muddy puddle or fallen branch. Michael could see with crystal clarity that he had perhaps 2 seconds to reach David before the snake's fangs would sink into the runner's neck or chest, delivering a dose of venom that would likely prove fatal within minutes. The mathematical precision of the converging paths was terrifying in its inevitability. Snake, jogger, and rescuer all moving toward the same point in space, and time where life and death would be determined. With a desperate burst of speed that drew on every ounce of his athletic training and military conditioning, Michael launched himself through the air in a flying tackle that would have made his rugby coaches proud. His shoulders struck David's midsection with enough force to lift the surprised jogger off his feet and send both men tumbling sideways off the forest path just as the snake's fangs whistled through the space where David's head had been. Milliseconds earlier, the impact was tremendous, with both men hitting the ground hard and rolling several feet down a small embankment covered in ferns and fallen leaves. David's headphones flew off during the tumble, and his first conscious thought, as he struggled to understand what had happened, was the sound of something large and angry moving through the undergrowth behind them. "Stay down and don't move," Michael commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed in life-threatening situations. "There's a venomous snake about 20 feet from us, and any sudden movements might trigger another attack." David's mind reeled as he tried to process this impossible information. Venomous snakes were not part of the wildlife he expected to encounter during morning jogs in an English royal park. His body ached from the unexpected tackle, but he was beginning to realize that this stranger had probably just saved his life from some kind of danger he couldn't yet fully comprehend. The snake, having missed its intended target, landed heavily on the forest path and immediately began searching for threats. Its tongue flicked rapidly as it tested the air for chemical traces of the humans who had interfered with its attack. The creature was now in full defensive mode, prepared to strike at anything that moved within its considerable range. Michael carefully raised his head just enough to assess their situation, keeping the rest of his body pressed against the ground. They were partially concealed behind a fallen log about 15 feet from the snake, which gave them some protection but also limited their escape options. The serpent was between them and the main path, blocking their most direct route back to safety. Queen Elizabeth, who had witnessed the entire dramatic rescue from her position further back on the trail, felt a mixture of pride and terror as she watched her protector risk everything to save a stranger. She had seen Michael's character during their many walks together, but this moment revealed the true depth of his courage and dedication to protecting innocent life, even at great personal cost. Detective Inspector Sarah Collins had been running toward their location ever since the emergency communications began, and she arrived just in time to see the aftermath of Michael's heroic tackle. Her trained eyes immediately assessed the situation, taking in the positions of the snake, the 2 men on the ground, and the Queen standing vulnerable but safe further back along the path. "Control, this is Collins. Officer Thompson has successfully intercepted snake attack on civilian. Both men are down but appear uninjured. Snake is still active and aggressive in immediate area. We need that wildlife team here now. And I mean right now." She spoke urgently into her radio, while moving to position herself between the Queen and the ongoing danger. The snake's behavior had become even more unpredictable after its failed attack. The creature was clearly agitated by the presence of multiple humans in the interference. With what it had perceived as a legitimate defensive action, its head swayed back and forth as it tried to track potential threats coming from different directions, and its coiled body remained ready to launch another lightning-fast strike. Michael knew they were still in extreme danger. The snake was angry, confused, and positioned where it could attack either them or the Queen depending on how the situation developed. His military experience had taught him that wounded or frustrated predators were often more dangerous than those acting from simple defensive instincts. "David, is it?" Michael said quietly to the jogger beside him. "I need you to listen very carefully and do exactly what I tell you. We're going to move very slowly backward, staying as low as possible, until we reach that larger fallen tree about 10 feet behind us. Don't stand up. Don't make any quick movements. And don't take your eyes off that snake." David nodded, his face pale with shock and fear as he finally caught sight of the massive serpent that had nearly killed him. The creature was even more terrifying than he had imagined from Michael's warnings. Its size, its obvious aggressiveness, and the deadly grace of its movements were unlike anything he had ever seen outside of nature documentaries about the world's most dangerous animals. The wildlife specialists who had been contacted were still 15 minutes away, but their radio communications with Detective Collins had provided crucial information about the species they were likely dealing with. Based on the descriptions being relayed from the scene, they were preparing equipment specifically designed for handling large, aggressive, venomous snakes. Medical support was also en route, including a helicopter equipped with anti-venom treatments for exotic snake bites and a trauma team experienced in dealing with the kinds of injuries that could result from encounters with dangerous wildlife. The nearest hospital with expertise in treating exotic venom poisoning had been placed on alert and was preparing to perceive potential patients. Michael and David began their careful retreat, moving inches at a time while keeping their bodies as close to the ground as possible. The snake watched their movements, but didn't immediately react aggressively, perhaps confused by their submissive posture and slow movements that didn't trigger its predatory instincts. The Queen, meanwhile, was experiencing emotions she hadn't felt since the dark days of World War II, when London was under constant threat of bombing. Watching someone risk their life to protect others brought back memories of the courage she had witnessed during the war years, when ordinary people had performed extraordinary acts of heroism in the face of mortal danger. "Sarah, is there anything I can do to help?" the Queen asked Detective Inspector Collins quietly. "I feel rather useless standing here while Michael and that poor jogger are and such." Danger Collins appreciated the Queen's desire to help, but her primary job was ensuring Her Majesty's safety, while her colleague dealt with the immediate crisis. "The most helpful thing you can do right now, Your Majesty, is to stay exactly where you are, so that we can focus on getting those two men to safety without worrying about additional risks." The snake suddenly moved again, not attacking, but repositioning itself to get a better view of the retreating humans. Its new position unfortunately placed it even closer to the Queen's location, reducing the margin of safety that had been providing some comfort to the protection. Team Michael saw the snake's movement and realized that their careful retreat had inadvertently created a new problem. The creature was now positioned where it could potentially threaten the Queen if it decided to abandon its focus on the men and seek what it might perceive as easier prey. In that moment, Michael made another split-second decision that would test his courage and skill to their absolute limits. He would have to draw the snake's attention back to himself, keeping it focused on him rather than allowing it to discover the presence of the most important person in Britain. Michael realized with growing alarm that the snake's new position created an even more dangerous situation than before. The massive serpent had moved to a spot where it could easily detect the Queen's presence if it chose to investigate the area more thoroughly. Her Majesty was standing perfectly still, about 40 feet away. But venomous snakes had excellent senses for detecting heat, movement, and the chemical signatures of nearby prey, making one of the most difficult decisions of his military career. Michael knew he had to draw the snake's full attention back to himself and keep it focused away from both the Queen and David. This would mean abandoning the relative safety of their concealed position and deliberately making himself the primary target of one of nature's most efficient killing machines. "David, when I move, you need to continue backing toward that large tree very slowly," Michael whispered to the terrified jogger beside him. "Don't run, don't stand up quickly, and don't make any noise. Just keep moving away from the snake until you reach Detective Collins. Do you understand?" David nodded, his face white with fear but his eyes showing the determination of someone who finally grasped the life-or-death nature of their situation. The accountant had never faced anything more dangerous than a difficult audit, but he was discovering reserves of courage he never knew he possessed. Michael slowly rose to a crouching position, making himself visible to the snake while maintaining a posture that would allow him to move quickly in any direction. The creature's head immediately swiveled toward him, its dark eyes locking onto this new threat with predatory focus. The serpent's tongue flicked more rapidly as it analyzed the chemical information that would help it decide whether to attack or retreat. "Come on, you magnificent beast," Michael said quietly, his voice steady despite the terror coursing through his system. "I'm the one who interfered with your hunting. I'm the threat you need to worry about, not anyone else in this forest." The snake's response was immediate and terrifying. It began moving directly toward Michael with the confident, fluid motion of a predator that had decided its course of action. The creature's head remained raised and alert, its body forming the distinctive S-curves that would provide maximum power for a strike when it came. Within range of its target, Queen Elizabeth watched this incredible display of courage with emotions she could barely contain. She had seen bravery during wartime, had honored countless heroes throughout her reign. But watching someone deliberately place himself between her and mortal danger created feelings of gratitude and admiration that were almost overwhelming. Michael was risking everything to protect not just her life, but the life of a complete stranger he had never met before. Detective Inspector Sarah Collins coordinated frantically with the approaching wildlife team while maintaining her protective position near the Queen. The specialists were now less than 10 minutes away, but the situation was developing too quickly to wait for their arrival. She began moving carefully toward a position where she might be able to provide assistance if Michael's confrontation with the snake went badly. "Control, this is Collins. Thompson has deliberately engaged the snake to draw it away from the principal and the civilian. We need those wildlife specialists here immediately, and we need medical support standing by. This situation is about to reach a critical point." She spoke rapidly into her radio while keeping her eyes fixed on the unfolding drama. The snake was now within striking distance of Michael, its massive body coiled and ready to launch the kind of lightning-fast attack that had made it one of nature's most successful predators. Michael could see the creature's muscles tensing for the strike, and he prepared to use every ounce of his military training to survive the next few seconds. What happened next would be talked about in royal protection circles for decades to come. As the snake launched itself forward with deadly precision, Michael didn't try to dodge or run. Instead, he grabbed a fallen branch about 3 feet long and met the serpent's attack head-on, using the stick to intercept the snake's strike while throwing himself backward to avoid the full force of its assault. The branch connected with the snake's head just as its fangs would have reached Michael's chest, deflecting the attack enough to prevent a fatal bite while still allowing the creature's momentum to carry both of them to the ground in a terrifying tangle of human limbs and serpentine coils. Michael felt the snake's powerful muscles wrapping around his legs as he struggled to maintain control of the improvised weapon that was all that stood between him and certain death. Next 30 seconds were a blur of desperate combat that tested every survival skill Michael had learned during his military service. The snake was incredibly strong and surprisingly fast, its coils tightening around his legs while its head darted repeatedly toward his torso, seeking an opportunity to deliver its lethal bite. Michael used the branch to block each strike while trying to work his way free from the creature's crushing grip. David Walsh, the jogger who had started this entire crisis, watched in horrified fascination as the man who had saved his life fought for survival against impossible odds. Despite his terror, David found himself looking around desperately for something he could use to help, some way to repay the debt he owed to this incredibly brave stranger. The wildlife specialists, led by Dr. Rebecca Martinez, finally arrived on the scene just as Michael's strength was beginning to fail. Dr. Martinez is one of Britain's leading experts on venomous snakes, and she immediately assessed the situation with the professional calm that came from 30 years of handling the world's most dangerous reptiles. "Nobody move or make any noise," Dr. Martinez commanded as her team began unpacking specialized equipment designed for safely capturing and restraining large venomous snakes. Any sudden movements or loud sounds could make this situation even more dangerous for everyone involved. Dr. Martinez's team worked with practiced efficiency, setting up snake hooks, containment tubes, and safety barriers while she assessed the best approach for separating Michael from the deadly serpent without triggering a fatal bite. Her years of experience told her that the snake was operating purely on defensive instincts now, which made it both predictable and extremely dangerous. Michael, meanwhile, was using every technique he had learned about close-quarters combat to stay alive. The snake's coils had tightened around his lower legs, but his upper body remained free enough to continue blocking the creature's strikes with his improvised weapon. Sweat poured down his face as he fought exhaustion and the growing realization that he couldn't maintain this level of defense much longer. "Michael, when I give the signal, I need you to push the snake's head away from you as hard as you can and then roll to your left," Dr. Martinez called out, her voice calm and authoritative. "My team will use that moment to secure the head with our restraint equipment. Do you understand?" Michael nodded, not daring to speak and lose focus on the snake's movements. The creature's strikes were becoming more frequent and aggressive as it grew, frustrated by its inability to deliver a successful bite. Its dark eyes showed the kind of predatory determination that had allowed its species to survive for millions of years as apex predators. Queen Elizabeth found herself holding her breath as she watched the rescue attempt unfold. The sight of her protector locked in mortal combat with such a dangerous creature was almost too much to bear. But she forced herself to remain calm and still, knowing that any distraction could prove fatal for everyone involved. Detective Inspector Collins maintained her protective position while coordinating with additional emergency services that were now converging on their location. Ambulances, police units, and even a helicopter medical team were standing by in case the situation took a turn for the worse. "Now, Michael," Dr. Martinez shouted. Michael summoned his remaining strength and shoved the snake's head away with both hands while rolling hard to his left. The movement caught the serpent off guard just long enough for Dr. Martinez's team to slip a specialized tube over the creature's head and secure its jaws, preventing any further attempts to bite. The snake's body continued to thrash and coil as the wildlife team worked to safely restrain it. But the immediate danger of a fatal bite had passed. Michael lay on the forest floor, gasping for breath and checking himself for any wounds that might indicate he had been bitten during the struggle. "Are you injured?" Dr. Martinez asked as she knelt beside Michael, her experienced eyes scanning for any signs of fang marks or venom poisoning. "Any pain, swelling, or numbness anywhere on your body?" Michael carefully moved his arms and legs, checking for the telltale signs of snake bite that could mean the difference between life and death. "I don't think so," he said breathlessly. The snake never got past the stick, but it came close several times. The wildlife team had now successfully secured the massive serpent in a specially designed container that would allow them to transport it safely while preventing any chance of escape or further attacks. Dr. Martinez confirmed that the creature was a gaboon viper, one of the world's most venomous snakes, which had somehow found its way into the English countryside far from its native African habitat. Queen Elizabeth approached the group slowly, her face showing the immense relief and gratitude she felt toward the man who had risked everything to protect both her and an innocent stranger. "Michael, I believe I speak for everyone here when I say that your actions today represent the very finest traditions of courage, selfless service," she said, her voice carrying the deep emotion she rarely allowed herself to show in public. David Walsh, the jogger whose morning run had nearly ended in tragedy, stood with tears in his eyes as he tried to find words adequate to thank the man who had saved his life. "I don't even know how to begin to thank you," he said to Michael. "You risked everything for someone you'd never met. I'll never forget what you did today." The medical team conducted thorough examinations of both Michael and David, confirming that neither had been bitten or seriously injured during their encounter with the deadly snake. The helicopter that had been standing by was able to stand down, though medical personnel remained on scene as a precaution while the situation was fully resolved. As the various emergency teams began packing their equipment and preparing to leave, the forest gradually returned to its normal, peaceful state. Birds began singing again in the trees overhead, and the oppressive tension that had filled the air during the crisis slowly dissipated. Dr. Martinez explained that the Gaboon viper had most likely escaped from an illegal private collection, as there had been several reports in recent months of exotic pets being abandoned by owners who could no longer care for them properly. The snake would be relocated to a specialized facility where it could live safely without posing a threat to the public. The Queen's morning walk had certainly not proceeded as anyone had planned, but it had revealed the extraordinary character of the people sworn to protect her and the lengths they would go to preserve innocent life, even when it meant putting themselves in mortal danger. 3 weeks after the dramatic encounter in Windsor Great Park, Michael Thompson stood in the grand throne room of Buckingham Palace, wearing his finest dress uniform and feeling more nervous than he had during his face-to-face battle with the deadly snake. Today, Queen Elizabeth was personally presenting him with the George Cross, Britain's highest award for civilian gallantry, in recognition of his extraordinary courage in saving both the Queen's life and that of an innocent jogger. The ceremony was attended by Michael's family, including his parents who had traveled from Scotland and could barely contain their pride. As they watched their son receive recognition for his heroic actions, David Walsh, the jogger whose life Michael had saved, was also present, having become an unexpected friend during the weeks following their shared ordeal in the DCS. Sergeant Michael Thompson, the Queen announced in her clear, authoritative voice that carried icily throughout the ornate room. Your actions on that morning in Windsor Great Park demonstrated the very highest standards of courage, selflessness, and dedication to protecting human life. When faced with mortal danger, you chose to risk everything to save others, embodying the finest traditions of service to crown and country. As the Queen pinned the prestigious medal to Michael's uniform, she spoke quietly so that only he could hear. I have honored many brave individuals during my reign, Michael, but I have rarely witnessed such immediate and selfless courage as you displayed that morning. Your actions saved at least 2 lives, and possibly more if that creature had continued to threaten visitors to the park. Michael felt overwhelmed by the honor being bestowed upon him and by the personal words from the monarch he had sworn to protect. Your Majesty, I was simply doing my duty as I understood it. Protecting innocent people from harm is what I trained for, regardless of whether they wear a crown or running shoes. The Queen smiled at his response. Recognizing the humility and genuine character that had driven his heroic actions, that attitude is exactly why you were the right person to be walking with me that morning, Michael. Your instincts and your courage made all the difference when it mattered most. After the formal ceremony concluded, Michael found himself reflecting on how dramatically his life had changed since that peaceful morning walk that had turned into a life-or-death struggle. The media coverage of his heroic actions had made him something of a celebrity, though he remained uncomfortable with the attention and preferred to focus on his ongoing duties as a member of the Queen's protection, detailed Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the wildlife expert who had led the team that safely captured the Gaboon viper, had stayed in touch with Michael since the incident. She had explained that the snake had indeed escaped from an illegal exotic pet collection in London, and that several other dangerous animals were still missing and potentially threatening public safety. Your quick thinking and brave actions prevented what could have been a much larger tragedy, Dr. Martinez had told Michael during one of their conversations. If that snake had successfully attacked either you, the Queen, or the jogger, it would likely have continued hunting in the park until it encountered other visitors. Gaboon vipers are ambush predators, and they don't typically retreat after establishing territory they consider suitable for hunting. The incident had also led to significant changes in security protocols for royal walks in natural areas. Additional wildlife surveys were now conducted before any outdoor excursions, and protection teams received enhanced training in dealing with various types of animal threats. The peaceful morning walks that the Queen enjoyed so much would continue, but with additional precautions to prevent similar dangerous encounters. David Walsh had become an advocate for responsible exotic pet ownership after his near-death experience with the escaped snake. He had started a foundation dedicated to educating people about the dangers of keeping venomous animals as pets and supporting legislation to prevent illegal importation and ownership of dangerous species. Michael didn't just save my life that morning. David often said during his speaking engagements about exotic pet dangers, "He saved me from living the rest of my life knowing that an innocent person had died because of my morning jog routine." His courage prevented a tragedy that would have haunted multiple families forever. The friendship that had developed between Michael and David was one of the unexpected, positive outcomes of their terrifying shared experience. Despite their very different backgrounds, one a royal protection officer and former soldier, the other a mild-mannered accountant, they had discovered a deep mutual respect and genuine liking for each other that transcended their different life experiences. Michael's military colleagues had been unanimous in their admiration for his actions, particularly his decision to abandon his protective position near the Queen in order to save a civilian's life. This choice, which could have been seen as a violation of his primary duty, was instead viewed as the highest expression of the values that the Royal Protection Service was meant to embody. Any of us can follow orders and stick to protocols when situations develop as expected, commented Colonel James Richardson, Michael's former commanding officer. But true leadership and heroism emerge when someone has to make split-second decisions in unprecedented circumstances. Michael's actions that day showed the kind of moral courage and quick thinking that we hope to instill in all our personnel. The Queen herself had been deeply moved by Michael's willingness to risk his own life to protect others, and she had made a point of personally thanking him multiple times since the incident. Their professional relationship had evolved to include a level of personal respect and appreciation that went far beyond the normal interactions between monarch and protector. During their resumed morning walks now, conducted with additional security precautions, the Queen often reflected on the events of that extraordinary day. "Michael, I've been thinking about what happened that morning, and I realized that your actions demonstrated something very important about the nature of true service," she had said during one of their recent walks. "Real dedication to protecting others means being willing to make the hardest choices, even when they conflict with other important duties." Michael had been promoted following his heroic actions, but he requested to continue his assignment protecting the Queen during her daily walks. These quiet moments in nature had become precious to both of them, representing not just a form of exercise and relaxation, but a reminder of the trust and mutual respect that had developed between them through their shared experience of danger and survival. The George Cross ceremony had been the formal recognition of Michael's heroism, but the real reward for his actions was the knowledge that his courage had prevented tragedy and saved innocent lives. As he stood in the throne room that day, surrounded by family and friends, Michael reflected on how a single moment of choice had defined not just his own character, but had demonstrated the very best of what it meant to serve others with honor and selflessness. The snake that had threatened so many lives was now safely housed in a specialized facility where it could live without endangering the public. While Michael Thompson continued his quiet service as one of the Queen's most trusted protectors, forever changed by the morning when his courage made the difference between life and death in the peaceful forests of Windsor Great Park.